the emotion that the film carries and like the responsibility we were going to be given. Rosemary, you'll know as a set decorator, when you see those sets that you get so excited, like once you've read the script and you go, I just need to make that glove workshop. Like I just want to find all those little things.
Welcome to Inside the Set with Set Decor, a series that focuses on the design and decor of the stories that excite us and ignite our imagination, where we discuss the collaboration between set decorators and production designers and hear first-hand accounts of how these works of art came to be, from their inception, ideas on a page, to completion, when we get to sit in the dark and experience them collectively.
Welcome to Inside the Set with Set Decor. I'm Rosemary Brandenburg, SDSA, and today I'm delighted to welcome set decorator Felton SDSA and production designer Fiona Crombie to discuss their exquisite collaboration on Hamnet. Alice and Fiona, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
This film is the cinematic adaptation of Maggie O'Farrell's acclaimed novel, which is set in Elizabethan England and brought to life by Academy Award-winning director Chloe Zhao for Focus Features. Congratulations to both of you for recognition that you've received for your past work together, because you're frequent collaborators. On Cruella, you both won the 2021 BFTG Award for Period International Film, and you were also nominated by the SDSA, the Art Directors Guild, and many other organizations. And of course, the favorite, Yorgos Lanthimos' amazing film about Queen Anne, set in the 18th century, brought you both Oscar nominations in 2019, and you also won the BAFTA and BFTG awards. So some amazing work. And you've also worked together on this season's Mickey 17 for director Bong Joon-ho, on The King in 2019, set in the 15th century, and on Macbeth in 2015. So lots of time together, and this project seems to be quite a triumph for both of you. My first question, have you developed a shorthand working together on so many films in different styles?
Yes.
Yeah, funnily enough, we were talking about it today. Sometimes we send each other a message simultaneously with the same idea, which is still kind of freaks us out, gives us kind of goosebumps. Like we're trying to gestate or work something out. And often, weirdly, because Chloe works a lot with dreams, but we have these like crossover dreams as well about the project, or like when we're trying to push an idea or something's about to happen, we'll come in and go, I dreamt, da da da. And it's like, yeah. So yeah, it's a very symbiotic relationship.
Yeah. But which in really practical terms means on a project like this, because we had like big distances, we were shooting 4 hours out of from where the studio was. We were building a lot of sets in the studio, but then dressing sets. So we can rely on each other. Like I know that so often we're like ships in the night. We're moving, sort of we're passing each other as one person's going up to check something and then I'm coming back into town, and we just know, I know that I can have Alice's eyes on everything and vice versa. So yes, we have a shorthand for sure.
There's a great comfort in that.
Yeah.
Fiona, how did you come to work with director Chloe Zhao on Hamnet?
Oh, well, it was just one of those things where I was sent the script, and it happened actually very quickly. I read the script and we had a Zoom, and I had a very strong response to the script. So I was very I had pages of notes, and I had, images and put together images, and like too many images, just like a book basically. And I think within 24 hours I had the job, and we were sort of off and running. So it happened very, very quickly. But I had also read the book. So I was very, years before. So I was familiar with the material. And then the script was, just the most beautiful adaptation.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a story. And from what I can figure out, Chloe Zhao you were alluding to her dream work, and she's very attentive to emotion and messages under the surface. Alice, did you have some early discussions when you came on board with her that related to that kind of thing?
I was so excited. I was such a fan of Chloe, like a really big fan. So even when I knew this was happening, I was like weirdly thinking about it, just thinking if that ever came our way, and we were nearly gonna, like, we were working on something else, and I remember hearing it like bubbling and just thinking, I can't even wish too much that maybe that would happen, because we both loved the book. Maggie's book is so amazing. So then, and the chance to work with Chloe, and yeah, the very early discussions with her, she's very present and so kind of connected to humanity that she is so sort of very relaxing to be with, because she's with you in that moment, and she was so connected to the work, and she had written the script with Maggie. It was so contained as a piece. And Rosemary, you'll know as a set decorator, when you see those sets that you get so excited, like once you've read the script and you go, I just need to make that glove workshop, like I just want to find all those little things. Yeah, those sets, that the emotion that the film carries, and like the responsibility we were going to be given to hold those spaces that Maggie had described was very exciting.
Fiona, the sets were incredibly well aged, weathered, and textured. And when I saw the film, because I hadn't really read much about your process before I saw it, I was convinced that you'd found some amazing locations and to shoot in. And then I got into it and I learned, of course, you built almost all of them. So that's just the triumph of this, and the level of texture and the level of character and emotion that you brought to the sets themselves. Can you tell us a little bit about this, how you came up with the director that idea of just the amount of lived-inness that you were going to have to provide?
Well, in some ways, I think it was actually in that first batch of images that I put together. They really stayed, you know, it wasn't one of these situations where you sort of have an initial impulse and then you sort of add and you change, and actually not that much exists. I feel like the images that I collected from the beginning, my first impulses were certainly in terms of palette as well, but texture are in the film. And a lot of those images were, you know, they might have been photographs of shoes by the door, or, you know, a bowl of eggs, or just the detail. So I remember feeling from the very beginning that there had to be something very tactile and very textured and alive about this house, that you had to believe in these people as a family.
And your sets as well, because Rosemary was saying how textured. I mean,
yeah,
the promise that Fiona made to Chloe, because Chloe wanted to shoot on location, and Fiona was like, I can deliver that to you, like, but in a set. And so the authenticity that Chloe really needed and wanted, she didn't really want to be in built sets. She wanted to be near real wood and real. So that was kind of you told her you were going to do that.
Did.
And delivered it.
She came over on a weekend, and I remember standing at the door, holding her shoulders and saying to her, I can do it. I can. You will absolutely believe them. And then we were like, okay, we're going to build them. And then like a week later, it was like, no, we're going to keep looking. And it was just like, and so I think we ended up with very little time. It was 9 weeks, but to build, you know, it's the interior and the exterior of the house with the gardens. And whilst we were doing that, we were also building the globe at the same time on the back lot and the A-frame. So it was like, you know, there was an army of people. But the thing is that we had done lots of testing. The thing for me that I feel really made an enormous difference was we had reclaimed timber that we used. And so we built not only with, you know, beams that didn't require aging, but they're also doing their own thing. You know, they're all bending in particular ways and they're imperfect. And so that for me really informed how the film should look, but it sort of almost like shortcut, because these beams came in with history. You know, they're imperfect, they're all scarred, they had a life before, and then we're putting it into a house that also has had a life, you know, by the time we watch it as an audience.
But then the processes you did, like in the attic, we always knew she was going to have to stand there in an empty set, which is very unforgiving because you can't hide. Like, so the processes on those, on that wood was, you know, it was intense and it was long. And this is, so you saw, this is the set. It looks almost like concept art, but it's the standing in there as an empty set was such a beautiful, like the floor and the wood and this was real reclaimed, but in Henley they were molds. But actually once you're in there, you couldn't tell the difference. And you push, I always say to the supervising art director, I'm like, you have to have really good painters. Fiona's like, she pushes them so hard.
Yes,
Like, and go again.
My particular obsession is paint. Yeah.
Well, you did a huge job of obviously of historical research, both of you, for your different areas and for the whole film, Fiona. But was there a give and take between period correctness and more emotional choices?
Absolutely. I mean, there always is. I consider design an interpretation exactly the same way that an actor is interpreting a role, or we're all there looking for opportunities. For me, as a designer, I'm looking for an opportunity to tell you something, to say something, and to have a point of view about the work, and then to use the tools that I have. In this case, it's architecture, it's palette, it's textures, to set the audience up, to go for this journey. And so we absolutely, our theory, going back to Macbeth, when we first worked together, is it's important to be informed and to know what it was, and then to make the decisions about where we walk away, and then we always are incredibly mindful of creating a cohesive language so that nothing is standing out or feeling, if it feels odd or it's do you know what I mean? Like then there's an alarm, and so it's all about sort of calibration in a way, like making sure we're in the right place. But we pull all sorts of, Alice is, finding amazing things from all over the place, and they all come together and they have a cohesion. So it's very tightly sort of considered, but it is pretty.
And so at the time that we're looking at the research we were looking at like photographs as well as paintings, as well, like preserved buildings that still had that information. So we did so much research, but then Chloe is really interested in like the authenticity of that moment. And actually, if that means that everything isn't absolutely as it would have been, that's okay. She'd rather be able to create the feeling and the emotion.
I was going to say, it's about the emotional resonance of a space and an object is more important than saying, oh, that, wouldn't have been there. I think that would just stops you short when you think like that. Yeah.
Well, she was obviously really trying to set up almost like a documentary director, a really visceral experience. And her actors, the stars, Jessie Buckley as Agnes and Paul Mescal as Will Shakespeare. I mean, I got the sense that they might have asked to sleep in the house for a while. I mean, did you?
They did. They did.
That's so funny that you say that. Yes. Well, Jessie did. Yeah.
Jessie used to sleep in the bed, so the attic bed, which it turns from the kind of red colors, which is her color, to the blues after Hamnet dies. She used to sleep there in her break. So if I saw her little tote bag near the edge of the bed, because I kind of pop up to check the dressing, so I'd see her tote bag and I go, oh, she's gone for a little nap. And the funny thing is the actual mattress was real, like lumpy. We had hand stitched it because the beds were always messy as well. So every single piece of bedding was hand stitched. Every piece of fabric was vintage. Like everything was either found and dyed and stitched, because we were like, we don't know how close the camera's going to get to them, and they're going to be in this bed. So everything was hand done. And so and even the lumpy mattress, which was pulled, and she used to sleep on the lumpy mattress of the bed. And the bed was made by this incredible craftspeople in Norfolk. And they sometimes sell to people in America, like they make things, and oftentimes they get mistaken for they get sold on for real historical items, because people believe all the way they crafted it was as it would have been. And we designed it to fit this space exactly. And Jessie used to sleep in it. So it became her little womb, like she'd shut the curtains and sleep inside.
Well, the bed, of course, is historically famous because I assume this is the second best bed, which in
Yeah.
William Shakespeare's will is left to his wife because, of course, she prefers the old bed. And
Yeah.
instead of when they became more wealthy, the
Yeah.
new bed, which I don't think you spend a lot. You didn't depict the new house, I don't believe.
We did just right at the end when she's in the garden.
Just the outside, right?
We did the
But yeah,
garden. Yeah.
but in this story, you realize that they've gotten more wealthy, and Will wants to do something nice for Agnes, and so they buy a big house, but she'd just rather be in her old place anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Hewlin's farm, starting with that, you created these gorgeous gardens where Agnes builds her medicinal plants. Greens team, I read, did the greens, who I've worked with, and they're incredible. Did you guys build the gardens themselves? I mean, that was a complete build, right?
Yeah, all the gardens in the film we created from scratch. And so Alice was instrumental in this because, it was about really, she just kept saying, you cannot go to the garden center like this, we've got to find scraggly, imperfect, plants that have been living there and for a long time. And we ended up I brought things from my garden, pulling out sort of overgrown sage and, bringing them in because they just have the right quality. So there were a lot of plants, but the beautiful thing is that a lot of them were taken home by people. So there's
Yeah.
like little mini Hamnet gardens all around London now.
We did so much research with our florist, who's normally our florist in all other films, and in this time she helped us with plants and herbs. Well, we had a herbalist on set all the time as well, helping Jessie. But we went to a place called Jecker's where we bought the correct historical herbs for the time and did a lot of research on. So everything that Annis had was correct, and the herbalist we with her when she was making her ruse and like mixing at the table. And yeah, it was a huge undertaking, and they sourced plants locally. And my mum's from Cornwall. I'd be walking around her garden taking pictures of like old scraggy bits, bits that are not like looked after and overgrown, and just to show that,
Well, a functionality.
Yeah.
The big thing for me was that they shouldn't be decorative. They're actually made for use, these gardens. And it's only at the end when she suddenly, has the garden at the very end of the film, it was 5 days and it was 3,000 plants were put in to make a version of a Tudor knot garden. But even then it's loose, it's not, there's nothing about Agnes that is stitched up or, ordered. So I don't know, it was beautiful actually. I really enjoyed doing all the gardens, and I think that they each speak to the chapters of her life in a different way.
The Hewlin's exterior farmhouse, was that built?
No, that was a location. And then we shot also, so the interior and the exterior, but we added outbuildings, so it just had a bit more scale, and obviously did the gardens and built walls. And the big challenge with this location was that actually, I mean, it's a listed building because it's a period correct building, but it had actually been renovated. And so for us, we were actually returning it to the way that we needed it to be. So there's so many beams that are hiding, thin door frames, and so a lot of time went into sort of bringing it back to what it would have looked like before it had a renovation. Yeah.
And then this is the apple shed, which is a pivotal set, shall we say?
Yeah.
In the book, it's such a remarkable thing, and I love the way you interpreted this very important place. This was her. Agnes is really her refuge from her family when her father remarries to a rather unpleasant stepmother. I mean, very unpleasant stepmother. And this is her little lair, and she, develops her herbal skills that she inherited from her real mother. And from here, this is where she comes with her hawk when Will first sees her. But where she's going, of course, is out to the forest. And she loves to forage in the forest and hang out and commune. And she has her very, very special, super important tree. So how did the tree come about?
The tree we found quite early, and I feel like it was from memory, it was like in the first week of scouting with Chloe, and we went I mean, it was a matter of days. We first met properly face to face in a car park at this estate where we ended up finding the tree. But we went there with, I mean, the plan was to find where she would give birth. So we were walking around, and it was actually the sort of beginning of the process for me in terms of understanding how we were going to work together. It was with Lukasz Zal, our cinematographer. So we were obviously looking for a place to give birth. So then we were saying, oh, it'd be interesting if it was like in a hollow so that it feels like she's having an embrace, you know, she's shielded. So we were sort of working it out collectively. And then we wound up coming across this tree with the hole. And then that tree with the hole presented itself a whole theme that runs through the film that was not there. Like that arrived courtesy of finding a tree with a hole. And then we, with the greens team, we created the forest floor and, like, you know, brought in a big rowan tree, and then we put in roots and did, you know, dressed the set. But actually that element just arrived, you know, like we just you know, it was so nice because we were all walking around with our eyes open, basically, you know, like looking for what could it be. And then we ended up creating a really important piece of the film in terms of this void and the sort of this black void that presents itself through the film.
What was amazing about this location is it's a piece of land that is not open to the public. No one stands on this land so even though there is, like, Greens team, they had to source locally, nothing could change within the soil, the roots, everything had to be tested and checked because it's so unspoiled. So it was almost perfect because every beautiful bit of land here, you know, there's big walkers that go through and paths everywhere, and this is untrodden on land. So it is absolutely fresh, like the moss and it's such a beautiful place.
So in this case, your director found her, like, almost documentary style, finding the real place with this real spirit coming out to accommodate or to enhance the sort of witchy side of Agnes, where she's, kind of exiled from the other community because they all think she's too weird, which is so interesting. And then you mentioned the DP, Lukasz Zal, obviously working with lighting and naturalistic lighting for early 17th century. It can be a little bit of a challenge. And I was really taken by your use of windows, Fiona, because, you know, you had to have some light inside these interiors because sometimes it's pretty hard to shoot only with candlelight, although that is what you'd have to do at night. And you're both experts on candles. I remember your talk before the Academy Awards, that your nomination for the favorite, and it sounded like you're both have advanced degrees in candle lighting. So that was really something. And did you get cues from the DP about lighting in the movie?
Well, we went in thinking, well, we know it all about, you know, these candles, and we're like, the double wick and this and, you know, all this. And actually he really did not want a lot of the candles at all. And so we created opportunities for candles should they need them. But actually and the same with open fires, because another really natural source of light is an open fire. But both Chloe and Lukasz were not fans of, I think it was the hot spots, you know, like you can see it here this is a camera test. It was their, you know, eyes being drawn to the flames. So they were really sparing and considered about the use, unlike something like The Favourite, where we really actively tried. I mean, they were huge spaces in The Favourite, so we just had candles everywhere we could justify a candle. This was much more sparing, which actually is more accurate for the period because you're not going to be wasteful with your candles. And so then it became about, you know, having windows and having opportunities and to have light come in.
Because we lit these candles for the photos, but often Lukasz would dress them all in, but he wouldn't light them all.
Yeah.
And he used, like, it's interesting, you notice the windows because Fiona and Lukasz, like, the house was set exactly at the certain point for the sun, that the sun would be coming in at the time of day. So because we could position the house for the sunrise and sunset, the use of exterior lighting and lighting coming through the windows was much more important, and the firelight. So the candles would be dressed in and barely lit. In fact, we had to give a lot to Wuthering Heights afterwards. So we expected to use so many more than we thought we would. So they got all our palette of candles after.
In the story, Agnes and Will get together in the country because Will has been hired as a tutor over there. And then they move, once they get together, which is a story in itself, to Henley House, which is the Shakespeare's family's compound in town in Stratford-upon-Avon. And this is where his father, John, has a glove workshop. And this was a big build. This was a inside, outside, multi-story home. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about the planning of this set, Fiona?
Well, I think that the great thing about this set was because it took a process in terms of scouting so many locations. We really had collected, like I'd stood in places with Lukash and Chloe, and we'd said, oh, this hallway is really interesting, or this door is really interesting, or look at the way this window works. Or so we sort of had in a way, like a kind of wish list of the sort of thing that we would, like to find, with the intention of finding it. So when it came to putting the house together, it was really quite like efficient, because I knew the feeling I wanted. I also knew we had spoken about things like what it would feel for Will to walk through the front door, when he's heading to have the dinner, and, the kind of weight that he feels, and like, the importance of the sort of the dimensions of the house in a way, like the layout. And so all of these things had sort of been permeating, and then all of a sudden, they needed to become a set. And so we put it together pretty efficiently. And then I worked closely with Lukash, really putting camera positions in and looking at how he would lens. And then we, again, just kind of kept playing with exactly that thing of like, how about a little window here? Or how about this? And how about, just adding a real dimension to the spaces. So they weren't just boxes and, lots of little off rooms. And so it was really crafted for the story, and not only with the feeling, but also with the camera in mind. Absolutely. It was probably the most I've ever done that with a cinematographer, is really sit at a computer, putting lenses in and modeling and making sure that we were giving him everything he needed.
And Alice, for this house in particular, there's a lot of emotion being conveyed with the dressing. Fiona, you mentioned the feeling that Will would have coming through the door, because his father is horribly abusive and an angry fellow. And he's, obviously a creative soul from birth. And he's being, shunted into the glove workshop, which is his family's business. And he just hates it. And he's got to live there. That's just, he doesn't have any trade. He's bad at glove making. And, he just is miserable there. But this is where they have to live. And so Alice, in portraying emotion through dressing, can you talk a little bit about that and the family dynamic and the violence here?
Yeah, we really and that was something threading throughout Henley that happens in lots of objects. So we spent a lot of time searching for broken objects, or objects that had been scarred or fixed, thinking about John's violence and how it easily things would have been smashed and broken or hurt by him and then patched back together like his children. And there's Chloe, when we were talking about work surfaces, she was like, I want to see metal. I want to see the scars in the metal of the violent, the objects even in there are quite terrifying. Like the idea that he could pick something up that he makes with his gloves, and when he's angry, and how much that could hurt someone. And, that there's these, so we constantly looking at tools. In fact, we went to Paris and we found these amazing glove making tools. And looking, going, oh, this is a really frightening one, or this would be so, and making it very oppressive, like beautiful and interesting and layered, but oppressive, in this place that Will didn't want to be, and levels of violence around, and kind of spiky things and things that might hurt. So it was a really...
I remember we also had this conversation about, because obviously it's an art form as well. In his own way, John is he's an artist, the lace work. And I remember we did all these beautiful sample cards that had lace and, and beautiful little tiny buttons. And the idea that this man will sit there and make these incredibly delicate, beautiful gloves just seems so poignant that he, in his own right, is an artist, you know. Yeah.
And, obviously you made Will's bed. Did you end up making a lot of furnishings for this home, or were you able, besides the bed, were you able to find things either hired or bought?
We made quite a lot, like we made a lot of smalls. We made a lot of, I had a blacksmith in Wales and London. So a lot of door fixtures and furnishings and ironmongery, lighting. If we found something we liked, or something from a reference, we'd make it with a blacksmith. And latches. We either adapted things, made a lot of shelving. We made our workbenches, or we'd find and adapt. So again, a bit like the set, we'd find something old. So it wasn't a brand new piece of wood. Use a top, use the legs, like put stuff together so it fitted into our world, but there was already a history in it. And we found that throughout the whole film, actually, especially with fabrics, that if something was new and we brought it into the space, not that it would be new, like made new, it didn't feel as good as something that was old and adapted or had stitches or had been fixed, or there was some history to almost everything that was there, even if it was something we made. But yeah, we did have to make herb racks for Annis's herbs. We made all of the lighting we made in ironmongery, most of the shelving in John's workshop and the benches. And then in the kitchen, we kind of made the sink area and extended around there. We had to use what was there and kind of build around it.
And Fiona, I mean, sort of edging towards textiles, what were your conversations like with the costume designer, Malgosia Turzanaska? I hope I got that right. Did you dovetail much with her?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm always interested in, speaking about palette particularly and also texture. And so I remember meeting very early with Malgosia to talk about, she had really interesting textiles and fabrics that she was working with. And so, obviously if they exist in clothes, they need to exist in the set as well, and so there was always a conversation about that. And certainly in terms of palette and sort of how to frame the characters in our spaces. I mean, she's a really generous person. I mean, we were always in each other's offices and, we all had sets of her drawings and her samples and we were always sort of back and forth. I mean, it's such a lovely thing to be, 2 minutes walk away from, the costume department because you can just constantly be, back and forth. And then the big conversation was really about how her painted costumes, her globe costumes would work in our set. And just making sure that felt like, it was one creative choice by this director, William Shakespeare, as opposed to two creative choices from, Malgosia and Fiona. So like we would sort of, work together to make sure that felt like something that, belonged in the film together. And so that was something that we just, we kind of back and forth quite a lot with samples and conversation. Yeah.
And Margosha's team, like we would go to the same textile fairs. Yeah. We swapped in and out a lot. So they'd go, we just bought this, but we're not going to use it. Do you want to dye it? And we'd go, oh, they'd see something of ours and say it's lovely. Or I'd go in to see the leather workers to talk about something, and it was very open door. And Margosha, if you saw her, like my assistants would go in and she'd just sit on the floor with them and go, let's just lay it out and let's have a look. And it was very, very collaborative. Even at the really busy times when it's like quite, you kind of go, the door was open. And that was so wonderful because we knew like there were no surprises for them and us. And all down the ranks, like everyone was communicating.
Well, your wonderful photographs of your process with textiles that you've provided showing, just trying to pick things. Everything is so textural.
Yeah.
I don't even know the names of the processes. Maybe I did it one time, but it's gone from my mind. All the different kinds of interesting textured cloths and embroidery.
We had a little theory that, like, if you had a drape, it wouldn't quite fit. You'd put something on the bottom. It wasn't like you just buy something off the roll. So you have a nice piece and then you add something, or you brought it from another house and then you add it to something else. So nothing was just like one piece. Everything was added or layered and getting light through it.
But I think, we should work out the hours we spent. We had a room, it was next to Alice's office and sort of diagonally opposite mine, where we would sit there, like piecing things together and trying, and, like, because I think getting the language of that was very important, and Chloe came into that as well. And she was sort of, moving things around. And there is a language that belongs to Hewland's farm and to Agnes's childhood that is not in Henley Street house, but then she brings it with her with this sort of red colors. And then there's a whole other language that belongs to the Travellers and, the puppet show. And so we were sort of trying to find different sort of stories with the palette, but also with the types of patterns.
The puppet show you mentioned was really interesting way of abbreviating the episode of the plague arriving in London, which was a long story in the book, which took us out of London and just showed us how the plague moved around the world. But this was obviously trying to kind of encapsulate that whole event into something really interesting. So you have a little courtyard here, which I guess you found as a location, and then you built all this cool stuff.
Yeah, that's in a place called Charter House in quite central London, really. What was great was, Chloe, I think, is very, very adept at doing, like, it's never too much of anything. So London basically became this courtyard and a road. I remember originally I thought it was going to be a lot more, but actually she sort of managed to tell that transition, because what's so great here is we chose a location that has walls. So you feel hemmed in. This is so tough on Agnes coming in, from where she's outside and she can always see the sky. And then in here, she's just hemmed in, and everything's these corridors of wall. It's a tiny little area, but we use multiple parts of it to tell quite different sections of the story.
Well, their lives as parents, the children are such huge characters in the project. And, their little bedroom, which is also got an A-frame for the twins, the life of a child. I mean, they have to work. They have to help out. There's what was the research like for depicting children?
Well, what was amazing and like an incredible resource is actually the book. And one of the first things I did when I started was I reread the book, but with, an underlined every time that there was a description, because Maggie did incredible research. And so that was just a brilliant resource. And Maggie herself was available to us. And I think that actually this idea of this family doing ordinary things was really appealing to me. Like, I wanted to show that and to find, we would think of things all the time of like, today somebody's doing, they're picking leaves off this, or they're drying this, or just always finding activity, because that's actually how you had to operate, And also it sort of goes with this whole kind of repurpose thing. There was a kind of an industriousness, is that a word? To their life that, I don't know, something about that just made me feel like it made them more relatable, and you're more invested in them because they are a family who are really existing together. So when that is undone, it's going to hurt,
And we looked at like so many different things for them to do every day. So slicing apples, peeling eggs. They had chickens in there. So every day there would be a setup. What can they be doing today? Like wrapping cheese, so they'd be home economists and food and slicing things and pickling things and preserving and like you say. And we just looked at what, a garden kitchen and how people survived at the time is grow your vegetables in your garden, grow what you need, pickle for the winter, preserve what you can, salt your meat. So everything was in that kitchen for them to be able to do it. So we're like, what do we put in here? We put in the things they need to keep their family alive.
But what was so great was we had this tiny little area on the way to the set. So it wasn't part of the set. And it was a garden that it wasn't just herbs, it was flowers, but it was all set up by our florist. And on the way to set, we would visit and walk through and go, oh, this is interesting because this is going to seed. Maybe they could be doing this. And so we would do a little forage and find, oh, this is lovely. These are blooming, and sort of they would make their way to the set. So it was like this, it was like this kind of evolution of this little garden that would then travel onto the set.
And then, as you said, the journey to London passes through the puppet show. And then here we are at the Globe Theater, which was a complete build, which is a really remarkable achievement. Congratulations. It's beautiful. It's a holy building to many, many people. Can you tell a little bit about planning and execution of this remarkable space?
We actually went to the Globe, and stood there together and with Chloe and Lukash. And we realized pretty quickly that we needed our Globe to be more intimate and sort of less adorned, simpler and more rustic. Chloe said to me she wanted it to feel like the inside of a tree. And I think really importantly that the proportions just became just that more, intimate, so that when you're behind the actors and you're looking out on the stage, you're feeling that audience. And so our research gave us leeway for sure, because, there's not a lot of documentation about the original Globe, because that burnt down and then was rebuilt. And so the replica that exists today is actually of the second Globe. So then that gave me all the freedom I needed to make my version. And that was very much about, you see that beautiful ceiling, like the joinery. We looked at lovely round barns and we looked at all sorts of beautiful sort of woodwork. But the big key thing was what is on that stage and how that becomes this vivid kind of love letter to their life and their story of that forest. And so, really for me, it was about framing this story and having your eyes go towards that forest cloth. Yeah.
The rigging is remarkable. I guess that was your team, Alice, I'm guessing.
They did. I was so proud of them. They did such an amazing job doing all of the weaving. And that was like the prop team, when you just stand back and go, they've just done
this
incredible.
It
took such a long time. All the rope and the roping. I suppose the favorite was candle. This is a lot of rope. And even you can't see as much when you see behind, but all the rigging of the rope that goes behind. The theory is this backcloth should be able to go up and down. So all of the rope to the sides of the Globe. And one of the things I was just most proud of and most excited about was that we made a fully running, functioning theatre with the props, with the backstage, and then the Shakespearean players came in, and most of them were Shakespearean actors who worked in the Globe. And they had their entrances, their exits, they worked in that theatre like it was a theatre. So as they ran the play, we would come in and out and just check where the props were on the prop table, and it was all done period, but
there was a
real
period prop table, that had little bits of string instead of tape. Normally you tape up the props but it had a little bit of string, and it was all laid out. It was perfect. And
they cut the bit with Ophelia and Ophelia's flowers, but we made out of paper all of Ophelia's actual quoted flowers, so rue and rosemary, violet, and everything she says in that speech when she's going mad, and she lays these flowers out, and they were all at the back, so the actor could very easily go back, get their props, and there were stagehand, actually dressed stagehands behind in period costume who are our standbys, ready to give the actors their, poisoned sword. So it was a fully functioning theatre, which was amazing and an incredible kind of privilege, because often we just do a section and watching the actors fully inhabit it was really exciting.
It was really beautiful. And I've certainly served my time doing Shakespeare in the theater. So I really enjoy it. It was great. And then you did the backstage, you did the prop room. It's just great.
Yeah, we did the armory and we did all these Easter eggs for, we worked out the plays prior to Hamlet, and we put props in that were there that could have been used in other plays, which was very much appreciated. Not necessarily all seen in the
but it entertained us.
Everyone that was there.
And this is an incredibly important scene at the end. It's just emotional beyond belief. And just beautifully done. Now some of your teams were amazing. Obviously you had the most incredible scenic team, carpentry team, and one of my favorites, people in the world, Karina Floyd and her prior Helen Player were on your team. Ellie Bailey, who I know very well, and
Yeah.
Jesse Jones and Drapery. So greetings to them. And but of course, are there other people you'd like to shout out to? Either of you?
Lizzie Bravo.
Yeah, we've done all of our films with Lizzie, who does our action props, and she's so heavily involved with, like, from the very early gestation. Muffin Green, who's the prop master, who would have all of that rigging, and Lisa McDermott, who's our standby, who, you know, like, we can do all this work, and then when you get, especially for those intimate moments, like what's in front of the camera, Lisa controlling, you know, we supply everything, but like being there on the day and making that. Yeah, and Jesse, as you say, Jesse and Drapes. He is our long-term collaborator, and you know what he's like, he's such a special person. And he had so much work. Like, we're coming back in with the hand stitching, and he'd be like, oh, not much sewing machine.
And
But,
Fiona, on your side, did you have super special
Oh.
people?
Well, my supervising art director, Tim Blake, but also Emily Norris and Katie Money. They were the art directors who did the Henley House, and they, they both have young kids. They just were there Sundays. Like, I'd meet them on a Sunday to just check, how things were going, and the love they put into that house was just it was really above and beyond, and the care that they just cared so much. But I think I don't know, I just feel like everybody invested, actually. I think definitely the Greens team were incredibly supportive, and so
Lisa Williams in graphics.
Oh, Lisa in graphics.
I nearly actually in the document put lots of her graphics, because she's an artist, like just an actual artist, and she made the whole book for Annis, which was her book, and pressed. And we have photographs and pages of it, and all the playbills and everything. She's a calligrapher as well, so Will's calligraphy, all the playbills were pressed in the way they would have been in an actual physical press. So nothing was printed on a computer. They were hand pressed on metal presses.
But she also did the backcloth as well. Designed, worked, we worked really hard to get that right. It was not straightforward working out what that should look like. And then, of course, we had Rowan.
You probably know Rowan Harris.
Rowan Harris, a beautiful
painter. Collaborated from the very beginning, from Macbeth.
Yeah.
He did the inside of the chapel.
Yeah.
And then he did on the King, all the works on the wall. And he nearly didn't do that backcloth. He nearly didn't do it because he had another film, big film, and something happened. Like, one day it pushed, and I had been ringing him saying, please, just somehow, like weekends, and something pushed on this huge film, and he was there.
Oh.
And we were very.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And Lisa and I, like, working Rowan, and I was like, it has to be Rowan. Like, we have to.
Be Rowan. It could only be.
It nearly wasn't.
Oh my God.
And we had, like, the amazing art director on the Globe, and then our coordinator who oversaw all of the gardens.
Yeah, Vic.
Yeah, it was Vic on the Globe, and Georgie on the gardens, like working with Green's team, which was a huge job. Yeah, and Ellie, as you know, Ellie knows where everyone is. She is, like, so whip. Like, we were all over the country, and we just had this huge challenge of doing Wales and London simultaneously. And that was, like, I kept thinking, I can't let this slip through my fingers. Like, I don't want these sets not to be detailed because I'm in another place. And so finishing dressing at 5 and working to try and get all the information back to London, doing 4 days in Wales, driving back to London, overseeing stuff there, getting back to Wales. So it was very, like, logistically, like, the team we had were incredible.
Yeah,
and we were
Rob
so
King,
lucky.
He was amazing, an assistant, and in set deck. And I think the thing,
Jo Graysmark.
Oh, Jo
You probably know Jo. I mean, she's a set decorator herself.
Yeah.
She's incredible. So,
but I think that the really big thing on this film was creating sets that feel, like, immersive and embedded, and like, when you're time poor, that is so terrifying, because actually what we want to do is be able to stand back and then go back in, and stand back and go back in. And I remember that being a real concern, but actually we worked out methods, like, you know, we would do rehearsal dresses in an unfinished set. So we would bring in the furniture and look at it and sort of like look at the space, and then so sort of tiptoeing in at every opportunity, even though there were plasterers around. And so then we were able to, you know, like come in and just dress. But I do really think that there was a lot of like intent from everybody, that they wanted it to get there.
Everyone loved the book. So to actually thinking of Jo Graysmark, her father was a designer. So Jo has this amazing collection of books from her father. They're out of print, because I'm like, I want to buy, like, where do I get them from? So just the Fireplace. So Jo was like our Fireplace person, and she had these pictures from her father's book. And Jo would meticulously find each piece, and then we would, if they didn't exist, they would be made to match, so that each fireplace that existed, and these are all from these really old, beautiful books that Jo's father owned. Jo was a specialist in ironmongery. So each piece, if I was anywhere in the country, I'd be taking pictures of it, sending it to Jo. She'd be speaking to the blacksmith, and we'd be making these beautiful things. And just, these are modern photographs, but in very old houses. So lots of the kind of texture and details are actually taken from the right time.
What would you say was your biggest challenge on the film? Whether it was weather, whether it was, I don't know, the whole decision that suddenly you were, you know, scouting forever, and then suddenly it was going to be a set. I mean, what was the big challenge for you guys?
I mean, that pivot of the build was hard, because we knew, like, there's one photo in the set where we put furniture into an unbuilt set because we knew it wasn't going to be ready. And so we kind of had to just work every weekend to the Sunday before it was filmed to get the detailing in. So we would bring furniture into an unbuilt, you know, set and just go, okay, is the table good? How does that feel in front of the fire? We want the chair to not be too dense so we can see information through it. And all that stuff you work out in a built set, we had to work out in a semi kind of, you know, once the chippies were going home, we go, okay, we've got a couple of hours, let's just bring some stuff in, let's hold a wall light, let's bring some fabrics in and have one painted wall so we can see how they feel. And that was how we had to do it, because we knew there was a point when the production didn't want us to work on a Sunday, and I wrote a letter saying, I've got a family, I don't want to be there, but I have to do this for the film. Like, I can't not deliver. I have to be able to finish it properly. So, and he, in the end, let us go in, you know, so we did like 3 weekends to top up being able to dress it. But that was a huge challenge because there wasn't enough time.
But also at that time, Chloe was shooting, you know, in the countryside. So I couldn't even get a visit from, you know, to get Chloe to come back to look at the set was like an 8-hour round trip for her. So, you know, and that did happen. There was one Sunday where I think they must have had a day off or something. Something happened where she came to visit. But so we were sort of, the geography was really complicated because we were having to travel back and, you know, keep our eye on what was happening on the set, which are often, you know, that's where the film was beginning. So you're setting the tone and you're sort of like the standard and the kind of level on the sets that you're starting with, but you're being pulled back because you've got to deliver this other, you know, build. So that was quite, that was hard, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, the film is a triumph. I loved it. It's beautiful. You've already getting lots of accolades, and it was a really remarkable achievement. So congratulations, and thank you
very much. Thank you so much.
It's such a pleasure to speak to you, Rosemary. Thank you for having us.
Oh gosh, that's delightful. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Inside the Set with Set Decor. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit our website, setdecor.com.